for inviting me to speak on predictors of ovarian response to controlled ovarian stimulation. Are they useful? And I'm glad to say that there was a very interesting discussion in the previous session in Hall C regarding this very topic. So hopefully you will all find this very useful and interesting. Ever since IVF came into vogue, it became very obvious that all the women going through IVF do not respond similarly, and there is a huge variation in the response. This era also coincided with various changes in the social structure, in that many women chose to have small families, many women chose to delay childbearing, thus leading to a situation of sort of involuntary infertility, and also concern about poor ovarian response arising thereof. This led to various important questions. The three important ones are: what do we do about ovarian response? What do we mean by ovarian response? Can we actually predict this ovarian response to controlled ovarian hyperstimulation? And does this prediction actually help us in improving the clinical outcome? So if we look at the ovarian response, ideally it should mean both oocyte quantity and quality. However, we know that at present we are capable of predicting the quantitative ovarian response better than oocyte quality, which will only be predicted by the pregnancy outcome of a cycle. And as yet, apart from the woman's age, we do not seem to have any effective test to predict the pregnancy outcome of the treatment. So we know that ovarian response can vary from being a normal response to hyper response to poor response. Even though in the initial years of IVF, the concern majorly was about poor response, as more and more women all over the world went ahead with IVF, it also became evident that we are not only concerned with the effectiveness of the treatment, but we should also be concerned about the safety of the treatment. And the only mortality arising in the course of IVF through ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome at all costs should be prevented. So the ovarian, if you look at ovarian response in great detail and also what implications it has, in normal responders who yield between 5 and 13 oocytes, they do respond adequately and they are fraught with very less chances of cancellation because of poor response or hyperstimulation. But on one extreme, we have hyper-responders where they do have excessive ovarian stimulation, leading to either cancellation of the cycle completely or freezing all the embryos and thus effectively abandoning that particular cycle. And also ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome to the tune of 10 to 30% of all cycles, where we experience some amount of mild to moderate ovarian hyperstimulation, and about 1 to 2% of the cycles where it can become very severe, leading to mortality also. The other extreme is poor ovarian response, where we have to cancel the treatment because of no response, or we have to deal with poor oocyte yield, needing high doses of FSH to achieve a small pregnancy rate and the cost implications thereof. And until very recently, this diagnosis of poor response has been a very retrospective one, in that only after subjecting a woman to the first cycle of IVF could we actually say that she is a poor responder. So how does prediction of ovarian response help in this clinical scenario? Prediction of ovarian response, if it can be done prior to the first cycle of IVF itself, it helps in counseling the couples regarding outcome, what they should expect as far as response is concerned, that is either poor response or risks of hyperstimulation. Then it gives a chance to optimize the protocols and results without increasing the complications, and also it opens up the chance to intervene to improve the outcome either during or prior to treatment. This led to the development over the years of a huge range of ovarian reserve tests, varying from biological, that is chronological age, biochemical involving various static and dynamic tests. Most widely used static test has been basal FSH, and most recent addition to this list of biochemical markers is anti-Mullerian hormone, and these have almost replaced the dynamic test, so I wouldn't refer to these dynamic tests any further. And then biophysical, most widely used and most widely studied is antral follicle count, and then histological, which is never used anymore. So what have we learned by applying these ovarian reserve tests to clinical situations? We all know that in a group of women who have never used oral contraceptive pill, the optimal fertility is up to the age of 30, after which gradual decline is noted, which gets accelerated around 37 years of age, and the fertility ends in early 40s. So we can say that with increasing age, there is a decline in the pregnancy rate. But the equation is not very simple, because ovarian reserve doesn't decline only at a particular age, but there is a variable decline, and in about 20% of the subfertile population in their early 30s, already there is a declining ovarian reserve. And this very important clinical scenario is not easily diagnosable, and on probing and prodding, they may admit to slight shortening of the cycle, but otherwise it is clinically not diagnosable. So basal FSH levels have been used for nearly 3 decades now to evaluate the ovarian reserve, and the data from IVF cycles, what we have learned is that higher the levels of FSH, there is a higher incidence of cycle cancellation, larger dose of gonadotropin is required to achieve follicular maturation, a lower number of oocytes are obtained. However, it does not predict the pregnancy outcome. So we can say that high values are specific for poor ovarian reserve, but the problem is that many women with normal values also have poor ovarian reserve. As we can see in this graph, maximum pregnancies are achieved when FSH levels are below 10 international units per liter. However, in normally cycling women, levels as high as 25 can still yield successful pregnancy. This data coming from our own unit, looking at about 536 IVF cycles, we can say that at no level of, FSH at no level of oocyte yield could predict poor or hyper response. Now looking at anti-Mullerian hormone, which is produced within the granulosa cells of the ovary, we know that measurement of primordial pool until now has been impossible. However, AMH can effectively predict the recruited follicles from the primordial pool. And one of the advantages it has is most of the markers of ovarian reserve test have to be assessed between day 3 and day 5, whereas here if we see in this graph, AMH throughout the cycle, there is no significant variation in the levels of AMH. So this offers a distinct advantage in that any day the woman walks into the clinic, we can assess the ovarian reserve using the AMH. And again, this data coming from our own unit, we can see different distinct subsets, very low AMH levels when the oocyte yield is less, and very high levels when the oocyte yield is excessive. There is also adequate amount of data coming from various groups showing that AMH is one of the markers which declines with age very significantly as compared to other markers. In this study of 41 women of various age groups showed that as a group they showed a decline in AMH level over 2.5 years. What was more interesting was that when that group was divided into various subgroups, even in women as young as 25 years, a significant decline was noted in the study period as far as AMH values were concerned. And not only is it good at predicting the poor response or declining ovarian reserve, at a level of 3.36, if it is taken as a cutoff, levels above that are very good at predicting the excessive response with a to the tune of sensitivity of over 90% and specificity of over 80%. Now, what about the antral follicle count? There was a question in the earlier session as to how do we measure the antral follicle count. It is to be done through transvaginal ultrasonography on day 3 to day 5 of the cycle, preferably day 3, and whether we should be looking at all the follicles present at that time or whether a particular size is more important. What is generally believed is that the antral follicles between the sizes of 2 and 5 millimeters are best predictive of ovarian reserve compared to those which are larger. So the small antral follicles, those between 2 and 5, reflect the functional ovarian reserve better than the larger follicles. Even though there is a very minimal intercycle variability among young women, this intercycle variability increases in older women. And also there is a question of inter-observer variation. It is generally considered that when we add up the antral follicle count of both the ovaries, if it is less than 8, it indicates a reduced ovarian response, and more than 16 is very predictive of hyper response.